Well, hello and welcome to another episode of Answers from the Stairs. I am your host, Chris Fester, and I have with me a guy that we've been sitting here reminiscing a little bit about some of how we met on this crazy journey on some cold mountain hikes and some ice baths and some Wim Hof breathing. And it was the weekend the world shut down in 2020. I've got with me Ryan Michler, the founder of Order of Man. Ryan, man, it's good to see you again.
It's great to see you too. Thanks for the invite. Yeah, I was thinking about that as we were talking. It was weird with COVID because I do remember flying home. I think at the time my ex-wife was in southern Utah and I was in northern Utah, and we were flying back trying to get into Boston. I'm like, we got to hurry because if we can't get back to Boston, I don't know what we're going to do here. That was a crazy time.
It wasn't.
Overblown, but we didn't know that at the time.
Correct, for sure, overblown. But I mean, again, they were shutting down airports as we were like when we were leaving, they were shutting them down. It was wild.
Right.
It was wild. I had
Right.
a friend of mine that's on the mission field, and he was coming from the other side of the planet.
Oh,
That
wow.
same
Yeah.
exact weekend, he was coming home, and he was telling me, he said, Chris, literally every time we would take off, they'd shut down the airport. So
Oh, he just stayed right out ahead of it. Good thing.
just ahead
Oof.
of it, just ahead of it.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
yeah, it's been a pleasure to get to know you over the last 4.5 years. That was a crazy weekend, lots of great memories. I actually got to I share with you the story about somebody saying, "Hey, we should hike a mountain like these guys." And I was like, "Yeah, I've already done that." And show some pictures from that weekend. Uh,
Yeah.
but really, what I try to focus on here is just your growth and the answers of your stairs of growth in the entrepreneurial space. I mean, you're in a really, really competitive space. I think that you're way ahead of most guys that are trying to create what you've created, and you've had it now 10 years. Order of Man's 2015 is what I found, is when it was founded.
Yeah, March of
Yeah.
2015 is when we launched this thing.
Right. So it's been around 10 years, and like that in itself is a success story because lots of businesses don't even last that long. But the first question I have is kind of what I've asked everybody. What's your birthday?
April 3rd.
April 3rd.
I'm an Aries. Yeah. I don't know if that's why you're asking, but maybe that has something to do with personality or what. I thought you were going to ask what's my sign or something like that, but April
No.
3rd is my birthday.
What year?
81.
81. All right. So I know you don't remember that day, right? But what's the first day after that day that you remember where you were providing some type of a service for someone
Hmm.
in exchange for some type of value? I mean, I've had guys talk about, well, I did this and it was part of my allowance. And I had guys that have run newspaper
Yeah.
routes and did grass cutting routes and all that kind of stuff. What's the first time you remember like doing something in exchange for value?
I don't know about the first time. I'd really have to think about the first time I remember adding value. And sure, there's little things like, watching my sister or something, or like you said, doing something for allowance. But there's one that actually really stood out to me, and it was a pretty strong lesson. But it wasn't until I was probably 17, 16, 17 years old at the time. And I was playing baseball. It was my senior year, so I must have been 17, maybe even close to 18. And uh, I ended up my coach, who I actually have a really good relationship with to this day. Um, he, I felt like it was my turn to start. I had another guy in front of me who's actually a good friend and still a friend. We hunt together to this day, and he caught, and he was an incredible athlete, an incredible catcher, and was so great at baseball. And so I never really got to start because I was always behind him. I caught as well. And I remember one game I was having a particularly bad game early in the season, and my coach benched me. And long story short, I asked him why, and he said, "Hey Ryan, did you do this? Did you do this? Did you do this? All the things that he told me to do in the off season." And I had to answer, "No, I didn't do those things." And he said, "That's right, you didn't do those things, and it shows, and you're not helping the team in this way." So he ended up putting either a sophomore or junior in instead of me, and I got pulled from my starting position. And I was frustrated. I was angry about it. And in that moment, I definitely could have quit. I could have just thrown in the towel, but I decided to do something different. I'm sure it was through his help and through my mom's help, but I decided that instead of throwing in the towel and complaining about it, I was going to be a good teammate. And so I ended up taking this other young man under my wing and teaching him during practice everything that I knew about catching. And he caught the remainder of the season. I'd come in periodically and do some designated hitting. But outside of that, he started the rest of the season.
Wow.
But I remember every practice sitting with him, teaching him, helping him, beating him up to the degree that I could to make him better to serve the team. And it was my ego said, don't do that, but I'm glad that I did it that way. That's one of the lessons that really stands out to me. That was pretty pivotal in my early childhood, and even to this day, I still think about it. So I think that's the first real time that I can remember that like had an actual deep, meaningful impact on somebody else's life at the expense of my own, maybe even to a degree.
Wow, that's good. That's really good because you think about like what you've created. You're moving men forward, right? And that's exactly what you did with that young man, like moving him forward and standing in as a mentor and a coach. That's really cool. Great
Yeah.
example of that. Great example of that. So you graduated high school. Did you go straight into the military? Because I know you're an Iraqi veteran. Oddball
Yeah.
story for the audience. I actually have a piece of your gear, your clothing, on a
You,
binder that you guys did with a company here in North Carolina. It's got some
that's
of your
right.
clothes from where you
That's right.
served. Yeah.
Just as
Um,
long as it's not my underwear or something like that, I think we're good. But I think it was part of my either my top or my pants, and we did a fundraiser
mhm.
just to raise some money. So that's right, I forgot about
Yeah.
that. Yeah, I joined the National Guard when I was a senior in high school. So I actually joined before I even graduated. And
Wow.
so when I got done with high school, I think if I remember correctly, it feels like it was so long ago. I did a couple of months. It was just some odd jobs here and there. And I think I even I went to a semester of school. No, I think that was after I got back from basic training. So yeah, I went to basic training in Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And again, it was National Guard. So it was the one weekend a month, two weekends a year type of thing. And then in 2003, we ended up getting activated to go to Baghdad. You remember the images and the video of U.S. troops pulling the statue of Saddam Hussein down in Baghdad. Well, I was in the Chow Hall. I believe I was in Fort Carson, Colorado, getting ready to deploy over there in 2003. And about a week before we left, they said, "You're not doing that anymore. You're going to Fort Lewis in Washington State to train ROTC cadets." So we did that for a summer. And then in 2005, we got activated again. And this time we went to Iraq. And so in 2005 through mid 2006, I spent a year and a half total gone, but a year in Iraq over there, 2005, 2006.
So what was I mean, you said it's National Guard, which what was the what was your motivation for going that direction? I mean, I think everybody I didn't serve, and my dad did. My dad was National Guard,
Mm,
and
yeah.
so when people serve, I always ask, like, what was the driving motivation to sign up to go and serve?
Yeah, I mean, I'd always been pretty patriotic and I felt like, there was an opportunity to serve and to do my duty and do my part. And I felt really proud about being able to do that. I ended up joining with a couple of my buddies, Jed Townsend and Tony Eves from high school. And we went to basic together. We went to Iraq together. So, we spent a lot of that time together doing that. So I think there was a deep sense of patriotism and growing up in a small town in southern Utah. I think it was even more so than maybe some of these bigger cities. And you lose some of that nostalgia now, but you lose some of that patriotism, the real pride I think that we have as Americans. I don't think it's completely depleted in big cities, but it seems like you lose some of that. And the smaller you get, the more that seems to exist. And everybody's proud of you and they know, they talk about you for years in parades and 4th of July celebrations and all that kind of stuff. And so that was good. And also if I'm being honest, I didn't really have a plan. I was going to go to college. I got an academic scholarship to go to college. I blew that one pretty quick
Yeah.
by not showing up to class and being too stubborn and arrogant to listen to what other people had to tell me. That actually ended up being a good move. But yeah, I didn't have a plan. And I felt like, earning some money to go to college, doing my duty, serving, developing a skill set would be a good thing. And it proved to be invaluable, not only because of what I learned through my time in service and other men, but just the idea of sacrifice and what this country means and the sacrifice that other people have made that were far greater than I ever made. So I was really proud and happy that I was able to do that service. So I did that for 8 years before I ended up moving on in my life.
Gotcha. In those 8 years, as you were serving, because there's a lot of guys, especially now where you got so much ability to put a brand together, right? That
Mhm.
have
Yeah.
come from the service space, like serving their country, and moved into the entrepreneur space. I mean, Jocko's always the first one everybody thinks of, right? He's
Sure.
entrepreneur minded. He wrote books that were entrepreneurial, and and the lessons that he's learned or guys learned serving are very applicable in every walk of life. Can you think of anything that you learned while you were in those 8 years of your life that you can say, "Yep, I pulled that thing forward. That was a step towards where I'm at now." That's like just
I mean, I think there's the cookie cutter answers, where it's like discipline. I learned discipline. I learned teamwork. I learned sacrifice. Like I'm not dismissing that as an answer. That is certainly true. But I'd like to give you maybe something a little different than just giving you that traditional answer. When I was in Iraq, before I left for Iraq, I was doing retail management, and this story does have a point, and I will get to it. But I was doing retail management, so I was managing clothing stores, specifically in Southern California, and I got my orders to come home to Utah and then deploy outside of Utah or out of Utah to Iraq. But about halfway maybe or so through my deployment, I realized that when I get back, I don't want to go back into retail management. I love it. There's a lot of things I still miss about it. I actually really enjoyed the work. But if I was going to advance in the career, I knew I was going to have to travel around a lot. I would go to different stores and help those stores rebuild or hire or fire people or rebuild some of the logistics. So I noticed there was a pattern of me going around to different stores. If I wanted to move up, I'd have to go to the home offices at the time, which were in Nebraska. I wasn't interested. I didn't want to work nights and weekends. I wanted to be with the family, grow the family. I didn't have kids at the time, but I was early married. So I came home from Iraq for a leave. And if I remember right, we had about 10 days or 2 weeks. It was something like that. And so I came home and I didn't know what I was going to do. And I met with a neighbor who at the time was looking for two financial advisors to hire to help build his business and to help teach them how to manage people's money. So I'm like, well, that sounds interesting to me. I've always been interested in math. I've always been pretty decent with my money. It's a fascinating world for me. And so I thought, here's what I'll do. And this is the lesson that I learned is I said, I'll take all of my study materials back to Iraq with me. So that's what I did. I took my insurance exam prep work, my Series 6 and 63, which are investment exams and licenses. I took the prep work back to Iraq. And in my off time between shifts, I would study and I would figure out the world of insurance and investments. And so a lot of guys were binge watching. 24 was the TV show of choice during that time. So a lot of guys were binge watching that or, doing what they were doing. And I'm not trying to dismiss or mock what they were doing. We all have to relax and
sure.
recharge in a way, especially in a high pressure environment. But for much of my downtime, I spent it studying. And that was the lesson for me is that even in the midst of something very chaotic and something quite literally a life and death type work environment, you can still be productive outside of whatever that environment is offering you. I ended up doing that in my financial planning practice too. When I transitioned into building Order of Man is, even starting my own financial planning practice. I worked for a firm and then I realized I'm going to go start my own. But that took me about 6 to 8 months to get everything done with what's called a registered investment advisory agency. And so I got all of this stuff done over here while I was working here. And that seems to be a thread line between the way that I've lived my life and built multiple careers and businesses at this point is I've never, I think of what a lot of people would say is, burn the boats, burn the bridges, don't look back, jump all in. And while I appreciate the vigor that it would take to do that and the conviction, that's not what I did. It never has been what I did. I always used where I was and leveraged whether it was income or time or resources or stability into building something else. Excuse me, building something else. And then when I was ready to make the move permanently, then and only then did I shift. And I've done that 5 or 6 times in my life in meaningful and significant ways, specifically as it relates to my career.
That's good. Man, that's solid. The even in chaos that you can function like that's a great lesson. And and when I think about the book you wrote, the first book, Sovereignty,
Mhm.
right? The idea behind sovereignty is you got the power to respond to your environment and to your circumstances. Like you're literally saying, hey, even the thought of that book while I'm in Iraq and I'm studying for insurance and financial investment, like that's an example of what you talk about in that book is hey, we have the ability to respond. It's just how do you respond? Right.
Right. Yeah, I just think too many people end up, well, there's a couple of things. So they end up wasting a lot of opportunities that they didn't even know existed. Those opportunities are staring them right in the face. And because they're not in the right mindset or headspace for development and growth, they don't even acknowledge that those opportunities exist. And these are the same people that cry about why other people get all the good opportunities. It's because those people are in the position to take advantage of those opportunities when they arise. So it's really important that we don't wait until something is catastrophic or we don't wait until there's an opportunity to do the right things, that we should do the right things now with regards to our health, our development of skill sets, growing our family, networking, all the things that might present opportunities down the road. We should be doing those things now. The other thing that I've noticed with opportunity is everybody is so willing to look at the big grand opportunity, like the big investment, the big career change, the big whatever, that most people often overlook the small opportunities. And they think, well, that's a waste of time. I'm not going to do that. I've got a really close friend. He's wanted to be a college coach forever since he was young. And I was talking to him the other day and he said, hey, man, I've got this opportunity. It's not exactly what I want, but I've got this opportunity to go be an assistant coach for a local college to help with the wrestling program. And he was asking me and a few other guys that we connect with. He said, "Do you think I should take it?" Now I can't answer that question for him. I would never answer. That's he's got to make that decision. But I did give him some lenses in which to look through. I gave him some perspective, and long story short, he ended up taking the position. And I commend him for that because even though it's not ideally what he wants, he's stepping into that small, seemingly diminished opportunity. But what that does is that opens the door. Now he's in the door. I mean, that head coach might leave tomorrow. Who knows? And if he leaves tomorrow, just because this guy decided, hey, I'm going to take a position that isn't the exact position I want, but gets me in the door, I think over time he's going to be able to prove to himself and the university that he's an asset and he needs to be utilized even more. But most people will overlook it. Like, no, I'll just wait for the next job that comes along. And it never does. And then they complain about why life is out to get them or why everybody else seems to have all the luck.
Yeah. When I think about just my journey in this space, like I started out in the detail department,
Right. Yes.
detailing cars. And like there's very, with the exception of the accounting office, and they don't really want me in that office, I promise. There's, there's not really a seat that I haven't sat in, right? Even though, like I knew eventually I want to be the one that's bearing the most responsibility, like the guy that's in charge.
Yeah.
But how do you even think about that if you've not learned all the little jobs that you're gonna be in having responsibility for? Like you've got to know all those little things. And like you say, sometimes that's what's missed is, hey, it may not be what I'm wanting to do now, but the understanding of that job leads to a greater ability to perform the job beyond it, I think.
Well, it's ironic that you're talking about starting in the detailing department because what we're talking about now is paying attention to detail, right?
Right.
It's the small little things on a daily basis that you go to the nth degree. I can't tell you how many men I talk with who are like, I am not happy with my career, and if I only had this job, or I only had this wealth, or I only had this thing, or I was doing something different, then I'd be happy, then I'd be fulfilled. And my advice to those people is be that now, like today. If you're in the detailing department, but you want to be in sales, then you better be the best dang detailer of cars that ever existed, because that's what's going to give you the opportunity with your boss to say, hey, you know what? Maybe we ought to try throwing Chris in the sales department because he seems to be pretty good in this detailing thing. I think we can utilize his efforts and his abilities a little bit more. But you won't get that opportunity if you just show up late for work and you kind of do a halfway job and you have a bad attitude and you're moping around. Your boss is not going to look at you and say, "Let's throw you in sales." Of course, that's not going to happen. So for anybody that might be hearing this and think to themselves, I'm not satisfied with my marriage or I'm not satisfied with my career. It's not going to be found in something else. It's going to be found in you becoming somebody else, you doing something different that will inevitably produce different results in your life. But that's part of sovereignty, to go back to what you were saying earlier. It's not hoping somebody else will present an opportunity. It's not waiting for divine inspiration where the clouds part and God descends from on high and the angels are singing hallelujah. This is what you need to do. That's not how he works.
Right.
It's little small things that you can take advantage of now. And then over time, you build into major responsibility, like you're talking about, or having, in my case, a business that has been thriving for 10 years because of the way that we approach our work, not in spite of it.
Right. That's good. Amen, brother. The and before we get to sovereignty, because I do want to talk about the beginnings of Order of Man, starting in 2015. What was the catalyst for that? What was the where did the thought of, hey, the world needs this? Because I believe the world needs this. Like I mean, it's a huge endorsement of Order of Man, the Iron Council, the 12-week battle ready plan. Like I can't, like I think I shared with you, I ran leadership development classes. I'll call them classes inside our organization, and I use the 12-week battle plan as the roadmap.
That's awesome.
Right.
Yeah, that's
I mean,
awesome.
because if you can get solid in your calibration, your mental or spiritual health, you can get really solid in your conditioning of your body. You work on a connection of someone that you've got that you really want to dive deep into that next level of relationship. And you think about, okay, well, how am I contributing where I am? Like those are the four
Hmm.
things. Obviously,
Right.
I've taught it a lot, but, and what I
Well
saw,
done, man.
yeah. But what I saw, man, was I can give you multiple stories. I'm going to share two of one of a young guy that came through it who had lost his mom, and he and his brother had kind of gotten
Mhm.
estranged. They lived 10 miles apart, and they had just not, like, since his mom passed away, she was like the glue that held the whole family together. And
Right.
one of the second, I think it was because I carried him to it for two 12 weeks, like 26 weeks total. We took a 2 week break, and then we kind of did another 12 weeks. And the second 12 weeks, he chose his brother as his connection.
Mm.
And it's always like I have or an I am statement is when I made them create is I have, and it was I have the relationship I have with my brother when we were teenagers. That was his goal for 12
Mm.
weeks. And 5 weeks in, he comes into the meeting. He goes, because I always ask for like the after action report. Hey, how's the week gone? How's it going? He goes, I've got the best relationship with my brother I've ever had.
Wow. 5 weeks in.
And 5 weeks in, and I was like, well, what's come from it? He goes, well, we started out just I committed to a phone call, and that turned into dinner once a week. Now this is 5 weeks. He goes, and now on my Thursdays, because he would have Thursday off in the dealership, he would go and serve somewhere, like as a volunteer. His
Hmm.
brother moved his day off to match his, so they served together.
Wow.
I mean,
That's
just
incredible.
like just by focusing on and being able to control like the reaction to a situation. Another one was a young lady, very young lady. She's in her early 20s, married, freshly married. They've been married about 4 years. She had a 2-year-old child. And she said, I just want to be a better mom. And dude, at the end of it, completely different human, just because of the things that how she focused on the relationship with her husband. Like that was her first choice.
Mm.
But what I'll just say is that's me endorsing the things that you've created, coming from the question of what caused that? What was the catalyst of this is, I think, a gap in the world, and I think I've got the way to fill
I didn't think that when I started, actually. So I didn't. I wish I could tell you I was more insightful or smarter than I was. I didn't. I actually started it for a very selfish reason. So to go back just a little bit further, on the tail end of my financial planning career, I decided that I was going to start a podcast, and that came from what I'm trying to be somewhat concise with my stories here, but one thing I realized when I was doing the financial planning stuff is my conversion rate from somebody who would come in for the first time to actually somebody becoming a client was this, and I
it.
wanted it to be this, right? It was low, and I wanted it to be greater. For every 10 people that came in, maybe 3 of them became clients, and I wanted to figure out how I could take for every 10 people that came in, how do I make 7 of them clients?
Right.
And what I realized is that in order to do that, I needed to pre-qualify. So when people came in, I had to know that they were already interested in the services that I was offering. Now, whether or not they worked with me would be determined, but I had to know they were interested in it. And I don't know why I had this idea. Maybe I heard it somewhere, but this was this was probably 15-ish, well, maybe like 13, 14 years ago. Yeah, somewhere in there. And it was before the technology that we have available now. And so I went and bought this Blue Yeti microphone. It cost me like $60. And I wrote out a script on a Word document of the first presentation I would give to prospects who would come in and see me for the first time. And then I went over to Staples or wherever I went, and I've got blank CDs. I went over to the studio that did professional pictures, and I said, I need a professional picture taken. They took a picture, and then I printed the stickers that go on CDs, and I started handing out my first presentation to anyone and everyone I could. And
Wow.
so anybody who came in, they had to have listened to my first presentation before they came in. And if they didn't, then they couldn't come in and meet with me.
Mm.
And my conversion ratio went from here
Through the
to
roof.
through the
Yeah.
roof
Yeah.
because I knew they've already listened to me. They've already heard what I have to say. They already are somewhat interested. They wouldn't be in my office if that weren't the case. So conversions became easy. And now it's just a matter of giving that to as many people as I possibly could and letting them qualify themselves, not me having to do it.
That's good.
And do it without wasting my time in a 1 hour meeting.
Right.
They did it on their own. So that was my first foray into the world of audio information. And so then I decided, you know what would be cool is I'll just do a podcast. I was listening to a few podcasts, and I thought I'll just do a podcast and I'll call it Wealth Anatomy. Because at the time, my practice was focused heavily on medical professionals. And so I thought, well, Wealth Anatomy, I'm going to teach them the anatomy of wealth and how to build wealth. And that makes sense for doctors. So I started a podcast called Wealth Anatomy. And I remember when I started, I thought to myself, no self respecting, educated doctor is going to listen to me yap about something for an hour and then want to buy my products or services. And I'll never forget, I got a phone call. It was a pediatric physician. He was out of Pennsylvania. And he called me up and he said, hey, I need some disability insurance. And I'd never got a call like that. I mean, I don't know about you, but most people don't know anything about disability insurance.
And it's a really hard pitch too.
For sure. For sure. It's just a pure cost
Yes.
with the anticipation that maybe at some point you might get hurt.
Right.
And so I said, okay, you need disability insurance. What are you looking for? And he rattled off everything that he needed in disability insurance. And I thought to myself, okay, this is a setup. This guy either is an agent, like a insurance agent, and he's trying to get information from me, or maybe he's already he's a consumer, but he's shopping around and he's got a bunch of information from other places. And I just didn't feel good about it. And so I just asked him. I said, "Man, you know a lot about disability insurance. Are you like, how do you know so much?" And he said, "Oh, I just listened to your podcast you did about disability insurance and wrote down everything you told me to get." And it was a light bulb moment for me. I was like, okay, all right, so this actually works. Spending time in people's ears, whether or not you're credible has, and I was, but whether or not you are, has some sort of impact in the way people perceive you. So I did the podcast called Wealth Anatomy for about, I was probably 20 episodes or so. And I realized quickly, I love this medium. I want to have a different conversation. And the conversation I wanted to have, because I was a young husband and father at the time, I'm growing my financial planning business. I'm struggling in some ways. I'm doing better in some ways. I just want to talk with people that I'm inspired by that I can learn and grow from. And so I started Order of Man, and I made the commitment to myself that I would do Order of Man for 2 years. I would do 2 years worth of podcasting before I ever made a single decision about quitting, continuing, et cetera, et cetera. And the first episode that I launched ended up having more downloads than all 20 episodes of my financial planning podcast combined. The first episode. And it took off almost immediately. And long story short, I was spending a lot of time doing both. And about 7, 8 months into it, I realized, you know what? I'm done with the financial planning stuff. I'm going to go all in on Order of Man.
Gotcha. So the audience found you. Like it was there already.
It was there. Yeah,
Gotcha.
and I realized that because I would talk with neighbors and friends, and I'd say, you know, here's what I'm struggling with. I went through a separation early in my marriage, and I would talk to guys about it. Like we went through that too. I was struggling with at times in my life making the bills, and the financial planning practice wasn't growing as quickly as I would have liked. And so I talked to guys about that, and like, yeah, we're dealing with that too. And then
Right.
I'm like, you know, I struggle because I never really had a father figure growing up, and now I'm kind of confused about what to do as a father myself. And the guys were like, yeah, me too. And I realized all of us have the same exact problems and none of us are talking about it.
Right.
So wouldn't it be cool if we had a solution? And that was Order of Man, and it's been a solution now for 10 years.
It's good. Good. And that involved in the Iron Council, which is actually in-person meetings, gatherings. Are you still
Some
doing?
of them are.
Yeah.
Yeah, some of them are. Most of what we do in the Iron Council, I would call it more of our digital brotherhood. So
Mhm.
it's a group of 1,100 or so guys
Wow.
now.
Wow.
Yeah, so we get together primarily digitally, although there are guys doing meetups throughout the country. We do
Mhm.
events and things like that. Yeah, that's the flagship of what we do. Structured networking, structured learning, structured accountability to really push these guys in the right direction.
That's good. That's good. So sovereignty of man. When I met you, it's what I told somebody there's no word for coincidence in the Bible, right? So I can't call it that, but there were five or six guys and we were all doing 75 hard together. And I
Hmm.
was in Utah when we met was day 73, 72, 73, 74, and 75. It was the last bit of
Okay.
it. And,
Okay.
and you may not even remember this, but we had pre-decided the books we were going to read collectively because we got together every week and we discussed them. Like we did it as a collective group. And
Hmm.
your book was one of the ones we had chosen, and we had chosen to read it last. So
Okay.
when I met you, I was like, I'm like, because I didn't know you were going to be at that event, and I show up, I was like, you're never going to believe this, but I'm actually reading your
Isn't
book
that
right
wild? I
now.
do remember that part of it. I don't remember the
Yeah,
75 hard,
yeah,
but I do remember that part of it.
yeah. So
That's crazy.
the idea of, hey, now I'm going to take some of the things I've learned from the podcasting, like some of the pain points that guys have, and helping guys understand, like you do have the power to respond to your environment and to circumstances, which is sovereignty. Um, like, was it just this? Hey, I've heard all this. I know there's got something needs to be said about it. Like, just walk me through the correct, because I love that, dude. I've read that book more than one time at this point. It's a really solid book, and
I appreciate it.
so give me a little bit of the walk behind that too.
Yeah. Yeah, I'd put out at that point, I felt like so much content. It was a sliver compared to the content we put out at this point, but
Mhm.
that was almost 10 years ago.
Right.
Uh, but I had put so much, I felt like so much out there, and I really wanted to find a way that I could package it in a really easy to digest, very applicable medium. And I'd always had the idea of being an author on my mind. And I said being an author, not writing a book, because the writing process is a miserable one, and I
Amen.
do not enjoy it. But being an author sounds pretty good. Writing a book doesn't sound nearly as good to me, but you
Right.
have to do the one to become the other.
Right.
So, yeah, it was interesting when I went through the process because I think one of the unintended benefits for me is that I realized that I'd been saying some things that I hadn't quite vetted completely.
Mm.
And as I had to write it down and really flesh through the details of that, um, I had to become more clear if I really believed those things. If they were, well, if they were provable, if they actually worked, if I really
Right.
believed what I was saying, and most of it, yes. But there were some things where I'm like, I don't know if I believe that actually. Now that I have to think about it and write it down and document it for people to consume it. So that was really telling. But yeah, for me, it was just a matter. I wrote the book in 60 days,
Wow.
and I realized I had to do that because if I gave myself 2 years, I would probably never write it. I'd never start. Oh, 2 years, I have plenty of time, plenty of time, plenty of
Right.
time, and I keep kicking the can down the road. And I said to myself, no, I'm going to write this thing in 60 days, and that's what I did. It's like the 12-week battle planning. I took a month getting it all outlined, figuring it out, and then I spent 60 days getting it all written.
That's
90 days, the book was started and done, and it's
right.
been a really big success. Yeah, but I wrote 1,000 words per day for
Wow.
60 days. Sometimes a little bit more. Some days I missed, but I made up for them the day before, the day after. But that's what I ended up doing, and so it was a really interesting, painful process. Um, but yeah, I had to really figure out, okay, what do I put in? What do I strip away? What do I add? What do I elaborate on? What don't I elaborate on? And what is something that I would want to read? What would I want to learn about? What would have been helpful for me 5 or 10 or 15 years ago? And that's what I wrote with Sovereignty.
And that was in 2018. That's 7 years ago. And I went on Amazon to look. It's still in the top 100 when it comes to men's studies. Like
Yeah,
it's holding its
it's
own, man.
crazy.
It's good. Really
It
good.
is. And I went through some issues. I lost my publisher and he wasn't able to pay me tens of thousands of dollars that was owed. And I thought, well, this is horrible. And in the grand scheme of things, it actually became a very wonderful thing because then I was able to negotiate getting the rights to my book back in lieu of paying me money. So I got that. I was able to republish it,
Mm.
which created some additional revenue to help offset what I had lost on the revenue I didn't get, and a little bit of a reinvigoration of the book and the marketing itself. So, things that seem like they're crippling or going to be difficult can be, sure, but also end up having some real blessings attached with them if you navigate it correctly.
Yeah, it's good. And then in 22, you wrote the Masculinity Manifesto.
Yeah. Yeah. That again, hard.
Hard book.
Where sovereign, yeah, and where sovereignty is really leadership of yourself, the Masculinity Manifesto is our call to lead others.
Yeah.
That was a really hard book, actually, when it came out, because in full disclosure, at that time, I ended up going through a divorce and dealing with some major battles with alcohol abuse.
Right.
And I had a lot of people say, "See, sovereignty, this message doesn't work." I said, "No, no, don't get it wrong. The message works. The plan works if you work it." So it's not that it wasn't working, it's that I wasn't working it. And so I had some contractual obligations to read the book, to do the audio version of the book. And this was after my ex
Wow.
told me she wanted a divorce. And we were in the final days of a divorce. And I'm reading this book, the audio version to release. And I'm looking at it. I'm like, holy cow, I'm not doing that. I'm not doing this. I'm not doing that. And the whole time I felt disingenuous. If I didn't have those contractual obligations, I probably would have never released the book.
Wow.
But I did. Yeah, I did. And it's been great. Like if you adopt the principles,
Right.
and to the degree that you adopt the principles, you'll have success in your life. And it's not surprising to me that my life over the past 3.5 years now has really begun to turn back around in a much better place, precisely because I'm implementing the principles that we've espoused for the past 10 years.
Yeah. I'm glad you brought that up because even the worst plan works if you work the plan. Right. And I believe that
Yeah.
there's a solid understanding of, you say it's a call to lead ourselves and lead others well. And I think that's the part of it. How well are you leading? Number one, yourself. Are you self-aware? Do you have any emotional intelligence? Right. And understanding, okay, there's places I have to show up for myself in order for there to be an overflow into everyone else that I have some responsibility for, and two, to lead them well. But
Well, another thing, if I can, about
sure,
that
sure.
is, one thing I often tell guys that if either I'm instructing or training or maybe even doing coaching is I'll ask often, do you get to decide if you're influential? Like, do you have a choice as to whether or not you're influential? And most of the guys that I talk with would say, yes, I get that choice. And that's not right. And I tell them, no, that's incorrect. You don't get to decide if you're influential or not. What you do get to decide is how you're influential because people are looking at you. Your kids are looking at you. Your wife is looking at you. Your colleagues and your employees and your clients. People are watching you and you're influencing their behavior, whether you realize it or not. So you don't have the choice. They have a choice as to whether or not they're going to be influenced by you, but you don't have that choice. The only choice that we have when it comes to influence and leadership is how we're going to do it. Now, this is intentionality. It's being clear about how you're trying to show up. It's communicating that effectively. It's getting the feedback from the people who are impacted by what you're doing. A great example of that is the one you gave me earlier, where you're training your people on the 12-week battle plan and you're showing them what that looks like and you're doing the after action reviews and you're following that system to produce a desired result in their life. You've been intentional about the level of influence that you have, not the fact that you are influential, whether you like it or not.
That's a good word, dude. That's a real good word. Well, I want to be like super respectful of your time. And we've talked about a lot. Um, and I've got a multitude of things I could say, hey, this is the mic drop I want you to hear. What do you think the most important thing that we've discussed in the last 45 minutes or so? What would you like
Yeah.
people to take away and say, yeah, that's the nugget?
I tend to be somebody who takes action, even if I don't have it fully thought out. And I think the greater risk in life is not overacting, but it's overthinking. It's people who will have this paralysis by analysis. They'll pour over all of the minute details and they'll try to get things exactly right and they'll wait for the conditions to be just perfect and they'll wait till they have time and maybe I'll do it this or maybe I'll do it next year. And to me, what I would say to anybody listening is just do something.
Mm,
Just do something. It doesn't need to be the end result, but it needs to be something. You need to start taking a few steps. And so if it's your career, maybe you're in the detailing department and you want to be in sales, then the first thing you can do is talk with the best salesman at the company and say, "Hey, can I take you to lunch?" And start asking him questions about or her questions about how they do it.
that's good.
If you want to improve your marriage, then the first thing you should do is say, "Hey, hun, get on the phone with her or him right now and say, hey, I know things haven't been going well. I want to talk tonight. Everything's fine. I'm not asking you for a divorce or anything tonight, but we need to have a conversation about what both of us can do to make a better marriage." That phone call or the conversation is the first thing you need to do. You don't need to solve all the problems, but that's the first thing you need to do. If you feel like you're a little heavy in the midsection. Maybe you're not as cut as you used to be, or you're not feeling as good about yourself as you were physically than over the past 10 years or so. Then the first step is to get up just 20 minutes early in the morning. You don't need to get 2 hours early. You don't need to have all your supplements and know all your training protocols. Just get up 20 minutes and go outside and commit to going for a walk this morning. Go for a walk, go for a mile or two. You don't even have to push the pace. And then tomorrow, know that you're going to do it again and again and again. And then next week, you can implement something else. And so maybe not only is it a walk, maybe it's a weighted walk. Or not only is it a walk, but it's 20 push ups before the walk and then 20 push ups after. Or maybe it's the 20 push ups and a walk. And now you're going to introduce some vitamins or supplements into your morning routine. You can do that over time, but don't think you have to have all the answers immediately. Just start somewhere with whatever facet of life you're in.
That's good. That's really good. Well, Ryan, I think most people would know how to find you, but if they're new to you, right, how can people find you and connect with you? What's the best way?
Well, you told me not to go on LinkedIn because there's not much there. So don't go to LinkedIn apparently because I haven't checked that for years. Best thing you can do is just type Order of Man. So if you're listening to podcast, Order of Man podcast. If you're online, orderofman.com. And then the place that I'm most active when it comes to social media is my own personal account at Ryan Michler. So if you look at those three resources, you'll find everything you want and probably more than you want, I'm sure.
Ryan, man, this has been great. I appreciate you, and I'm glad we spent some time together today.
I am too. I'm grateful not only for the opportunity, but for our friendship too. So I appreciate everything that you bring to my life.
Thank you, brother.